In this video, we're going to be looking at the current Liberal government's fiscal strategy. Whenever you hear the term fiscal strategy, it's basically what their main intention is of the current government's budgets. So what are they intending to achieve when they sit down and devise their budgets for every year, in May every year? So the fiscal strategy basically is outlining the longer term goals of the budget. What do we want to achieve with this specific budget? And how are we going to go about maximising our living standards with our use of the budget? The fiscal strategy at the moment is about making sure the government manages its finances in a fiscally sustainable or responsible manner. So it's all about making sure we don't spend too much today, so we have funds available for the future, so we're not going into too much debt, so we can preserve our credit rating. It's about ensuring the government can meet its current and future spending commitments without placing undue pressure on current or future taxpayers. So what we mean by that is we want to avoid deficits today, but we don't want to increase taxes too much on current taxpayers, but we also don't want our deficits to be too high that we need to raise taxes in the future because we're getting into too much debt. So fiscal strategy is all about making that, it's like a balance between, not putting too much pressure on current taxpayers, but also making sure that we're not putting too much pressure on future taxpayers because we're in too much debt. There's three key elements of the medium-term strategy of the government. Basically the main aim, and whenever you quote the medium-term strategy, this is the most important thing to quote, and then just some, I suppose, mixture of the other ones. But the main aim is to achieve budget surpluses on average over the course of the economic cycle. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're not trying to achieve budget surpluses every single year because we recognise that when the economy is going slow, we need to run deficits, and it's not possible to run surpluses, and we don't want to because it'll slow the economy down too much. But the aim is to run surpluses on average over the course of the business cycle. And then here are some of the preliminary aims. They aim to invest in a stronger economy by directing government spending to quality investment, so shifting basically resources to where they're going to be to help boost our productivity and boost participation. So that's what the jobs plan is all about, in spending on infrastructure. Basically, you want to summarise that to shifting resources that are going to maximise productivity and get people into the labour force. They want to maintain strong fiscal discipline to reduce the government's share of the economy over time. So basically what they want to do is they want to keep taxes low and also keep government expenditure low. So they want to reduce their share of the economy and leave it more up to the free market by keeping taxes low and keeping their spending low. And the final one is about strengthening the government's balance sheet by improving their net financial worth over time. It's basically a fancy way of saying they want to eliminate their debt. They want to get back into surplus so that their debt will reduce. So when you're summarising the medium-term strategy, surpluses on average over the business cycle, not all the time, resources directed to areas that are going to boost our productivity, and getting us out of debt is really maintaining fiscal discipline to get us out of debt. This is the current government's budget repair strategy. So as part of their medium-term strategy, they have these strategies that what we're trying to do right at this point in time. And this current government, its aim is to get us into budget surplus by 2023, 2024. We want to be running budget surpluses around 1% of our GDP. And this is what they're really focusing on. And whenever you read something about this year's budget, this is what they're going to be talking about. Any new spending initiatives need to be offset by spending reductions elsewhere. So if we're spending more to get people into work, that has to be offset by reducing spending in other areas, whether that gets taken away from health or education, or we crack down on people rorting welfare is one of the main things they're doing to reduce expenditure. So any new spending initiatives are offset by spending reductions elsewhere. Any cyclical improvements in the budget is banked, which doesn't really go with what they're doing this year because the budget has improved cyclically and they haven't really banked it, they've spent it, but that's what they're saying they want to do. And a clear path to surplus by making strong decisions to get us back to surplus. So the current strategy, 1% surpluses, basically any new spending has to be linked to spending cuts in other areas. Any cyclical improvements in the budget outcome are banked, and we try and get back to surplus. I know we've done fiscal consolidation before, but basically that's all about the government rebuilding its finances by reducing expenditure and raising revenue to try and return us to surplus. It's really important that you recognise that fiscal consolidation can hurt growth in the short term because it can lead to higher taxes, less welfare, less expansionary policies, but it should help in the long term. And why it helps in the long term? Well, we've got money for future economic decline, so the government saved money so they've got money to spend in the future, so they don't need to raise taxes or cut welfare, so they don't need to live within their means because they have a pool of funds that they can draw upon, or even if they don't have a pool of funds, they're not in that much debt they can't afford to borrow. Increases international investor confidence. So again, being expansionary helps to keep our credit rating high. So overseas investors are willing to lend us money that can be used for infrastructure going forward. These last two are not as important, but basically the government allows the cyclical component to do its job, and they leave the stabilisation role to monetary policy, like we were talking about in the first video. So here's just some quick questions. Describe the federal government's medium-term fiscal strategy. The government's fiscal strategy is about managing the budget in a fiscally responsible manner, trying to achieve surpluses on average over the business cycle. Okay, it's basically involving not increasing taxes, which will hurt productivity, but shifting resources to areas that are going to maximise our living standards. How can it achieve domestic economic stability by this fiscal strategy? Well, by becoming more responsible, this stance, it helps that we don't increase our debt too much, so therefore we can promote growth and employment in the long term because our credit rating stays high. This will make it easier for the government and private firms to borrow, it'll keep interest rates low, and increase investment spending and our productive capacity. This investment spending will create jobs and boost output and reduce cost-push inflation. It's all about the long term.